Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to the Muslim Marriage Doctor podcast with your host, Muna, a physician turned marriage coach. So my method is rooted in Islamic principles, and I guide women that value their deen towards finding a fulfilling marriage. If that sounds like something you're interested in, then click the link below and book a free clarity call where I'll help you get clarity on your next steps towards marriage. So in this episode, we're diving into the heavy question, why aren't my du'as being answered? And by the end of this episode, you'll walk away with the mindset shift you need to align your heart and mind with the correct perspective on this issue. When you truly understand and apply this, it'll become a powerful shield, making it so much harder for shaitan to sway you with limiting beliefs about your du'as. So I hear this a lot, and I hear, why are my du'as not being answered? Why can't I get married? Why is it taking so long? I'm losing hope. I'm losing faith. So the first thing we need to understand is who Allah is. So Allah is kind, Allah is merciful, Allah loves you more than you love yourself, and Allah wants goodness for you more than you want it for yourself. And Allah loves to hear us make dua, and Allah answers our du'as. And He says this in multiple surahs in the Quran, but today specifically, I want to focus on the ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And when my servants ask you concerning me, indeed I am near, I respond to the call of the supplicant when he calls upon me." So Allah is clearly showing us that He's near to us when we're making dua, and that He is answering. But there's a condition. So Allah then says, "So let them respond to me by obedience and believe in me that they may be rightly guided." So the condition for our du'as to be answered is that we respond to Allah through obedience and believing in Him. So let's get into why our du'as are not being answered. So there's a few reasons that can stop your du'as from being answered. So number one is consuming what is unlawful or haram. So if a person's livelihood comes from haram sources. So the Prophet ﷺ mentions in Sahih Muslim, he says, "Then he mentioned a man who traveled widely and is disheveled, calling out to Allah, 'O Lord, O Lord,' but his food, drink, clothing, and nourishment are unlawful, so how can his supplication be accepted?" So just make sure that your livelihood is not coming from a haram source. And number two is lack of sincerity and faith in Allah. So the Prophet ﷺ said that when you ask Allah, ask with certainty. Know that Allah will not answer the supplication of a heart that is heedless or distracted. And this is in Sunan Ibn Majah. So the Prophet ﷺ is basically telling us, when you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ask with certainty. So when you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for an amazing husband, don't ask Allah for an amazing husband while at the same time, deep down, you believe that there are no good guys left. So don't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with doubt. And the Prophet also told us not to ask with a heart that is heedless. So don't be making dua and at the same time think about what you're going to have for dinner. Make sure that your heart and mind is present when you're making dua. So reason number three for why our du'as might not be getting answered is delaying or abandoning the prayer. So the Prophet said, whoever abandons the prayer, it is as if he has abandoned everything else, and his du'as will not be answered. And this is in Sahih Bukhari. So make sure that you're praying, and you're praying on time. Fourth reason is you saying that your du'as are not being answered. So the Prophet said, the supplication of any one of you will be answered, so long as he does not hasten by saying, I made du'a, but it was not answered. And this is in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. So the Prophet is literally telling us that if you say, my dua is not being answered, that is an exact reason for your dua to not be answered. So just avoid those four things that I mentioned, and inshallah your du'as will be answered. And I know sometimes it gets super frustrating, it gets super hard with the passage of time, nothing's working out, you're still not married. I know how hard it can get because I've been there before, but the key is just to keep making dua with faith and knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to respond to you. So I want you to know that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired you to make a dua, that means it's going to happen. And that didn't come from me. Umar radiyallahu anhu said, I do not worry about whether my dua will be answered. Rather, I worry about whether I'll be inspired to make dua. For if I'm inspired to make dua, then the answer will come with it. So a lot of us fail to understand or comprehend that you making dua was a direct inspiration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for you to make that dua. It didn't come out of thin air. Allah inspired you to make that dua. So there are so many people in this world who want to get married, but they don't make dua for it. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired you to make dua for an amazing husband, an amazing marriage, fulfilling marriage, that means that Allah wants it to happen for you. So be bold and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the impossible and have yaqeen in that dua. So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for things that really matter, right? Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for taqwa. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for somebody who loves you and sees you as the best thing ever. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for somebody who will treat you well, for somebody who has good character, good deen. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for somebody that he loves and that loves him. So be bold in your du'as and know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that guided you to making that dua, and that means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually wants that for you and that it's going to happen. Now shaitan is going to come and he's going to tell you that that's impossible. Shaitan is going to tell you it's impossible for you to get married. There are no good guys left. You're getting too old. He's just going to throw all of these crazy limiting beliefs at you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already told us that in the Quran, in Surah Baqarah. So Allah says, Satan threatens you with poverty and orders you to immorality, while Allah promises you forgiveness from him and bounty, and Allah is all-encompassing and all-knowing. So Allah is clearly telling us that shaitan threatens us with poverty. It's a threat. So it's not real. So when he's telling you you're never going to get married, it's never going to happen, it's fake, it's a limiting belief, don't believe it. Instead, believe in the promise of Allah. And Allah literally says, Allah promises you forgiveness from him and bounty. Allah is promising you an amazing marriage, whatever dua you're making, and that's a promise from Allah and his bounty, while shaitan is trying to threaten you and get you scared with things that don't exist and trying to tell you that it's impossible. So this ayah is a powerful reminder to all of us that Allah's blessings far outweigh any despair or doubts instilled by shaitan. So we need to reject these whispers and trust in Allah's promise and his forgiveness and bounty. So another way that shaitan tries to get us through these limiting beliefs is that he tries to make you focus on the means that are in front of you. So for example, he tells you you're never going to get married because there are no good prospects. Or he tells you you're never going to get married to an amazing righteous man because there are none. You don't know any, your family doesn't know anyone, and you've tried every single method and you have no results. So that's another way that shaitan will try to get you through these limiting beliefs, is by trying to sow doubt in you based on your current reality. But I need you to instead look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his power, and that he is capable of everything and anything, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of giving you everything you want. So despite what is in front of you, despite the lack of prospects, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of bringing that guy, that amazing righteous husband to you. Allah is capable of everything and anything, and everything is easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you need to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power more than you believe in the reality of what you can see, because our minds are so small and we cannot comprehend everything, and we don't know the future. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala behind the scenes is planning our lives in the most perfect way. So I want you to think of it like this. Imagine there's a huge carpet and the carpet is white, and in the middle of the carpet there's a beautiful red rose. So now imagine you're a little tiny ant in the carpet and you're in the corner on the white edges. So as an ant, all you see is a sea of white. So you get closer and you get closer and you start perceiving bits of red. So you get closer and then you see a sea of red, but you can't see the full picture, and you can't see that actually that red that you're looking at is a beautiful rose. You can't see it because you're so up close. That's kind of like our lives. We don't know what's in front of us. We don't know the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is planning our lives. But our job is to trust Allah, to trust his wisdom, and to know that he is planning our lives in the most beautiful, perfect way possible. And he's planning our lives better than what we could have ever imagined and hoped for. So if you've gotten this far and you're finding this beneficial, please leave the emoji of a sun down below in the comments. SubhanAllah, I'm literally recording this at like 2 a.m. for you guys. So I really hope it's benefiting and it's hitting home. So now that we have tackled shaitan and the limiting beliefs and everything, and we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to answer our du'as, and we have yaqeen and we understand that Allah is the one who inspired us in the first place to make those du'as, we need to take advantage of every single minute and second and consistently and constantly make du'a. Because Ibn al-Qayyim said something, and he said, subhanAllah, he said du'a is like watering a plant. The more you do it, the closer your du'a gets to you. So he made the analogy of du'a being like a seed that you put in the soil, and the more that you water it, the more that plant grows, right? So the more you keep making dua, the more that you keep asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that dua is more likely to be answered, and it's more likely to get answered faster and quicker. So he also says, dua is one of the most powerful means of obtaining what one desires and warding off what one fears. So it's one of the most powerful means for you to get married and to ward off your fear of being single forever. He then says, if the servant's heart is truly focused on Allah and he continually and persistently makes dua without becoming impatient or giving up, just like the Prophet told us in that hadith of being hasty, it is almost certain that the response will come sooner or later. So we need to not give up and just keep making dua. So then he says, persisting in dua and increasing it with a heart full of reliance on Allah is among the strongest means of achieving the desired outcome. So our job is to be persistent in dua and to consistently and constantly make it with our hearts fully reliant on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's the one who knows what's best for us. We're that little ant on the carpet. We can't see what's in front of us. We can't see the big picture. We can't see that rose. All we can see is the colors in front of us. But Allah is the one that sees the big picture, and Allah is the one that's planning everything perfectly. So we need to have complete and full reliance on Him, and that is going to be one of the strongest means of achieving the dream marriage, the amazing fulfilling marriage, the amazing husband that you're going after and that you want. So now that we're making dua consistently and constantly, and we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always answering our du'as, there are specific times that we should really focus on, because those times our du'as are more likely to get answered. So I'm quickly going to run through them. So number one is during qiyam time, and that is the last third of the night, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends and says, who is asking me so that I may give them? SubhanAllah, this is an amazing time to make dua, because majority of the world is sleeping. So imagine you get up and you make that effort towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you ask Him, do you really think that He's going to leave your hands empty? So the scholars say that when you make dua during that time, it's like an arrow that hits its target. So try your best to get up for qiyam time. It can be 10 minutes before Fajr. So pray witr and start making dua. And know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears you, and Allah is close, and Allah wants to give you, because He's the one that inspired you in the first place to make that dua. And He's the one that facilitated for you to even get up at night and pray to Him and beg Him and supplicate to Him. So take advantage, because if you really, really want something, you'll get up for tahajjud. You'll get up in the last third of the night and you'll ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. So try your best every single night to get up, even if it's 10 minutes before Fajr, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what you want. So number one, we mentioned qiyam. Number two is between the adhan and iqama. Number three is when it's raining. Number four is the last hour before Maghrib on Friday. Number five is in sujood. And number six is the last tashahhud before ending the prayer. So take advantage of those times that du'as are more likely to get answered. And I know sometimes it can get hard. I know sometimes you're making so much dua, you're doing all the things, you're taking advantage of those times, you're praying qiyam al-layl. I know, but just stay persistent, stay consistent, keep making that dua. Think of it like you're watering a plant. The more you do, the faster it'll happen, and the more likely it will happen. Strengthen your iman, strengthen your tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and just keep going, and eventually you'll see it materialize right in front of your eyes. And have the best hope and the best expectations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and ask Him to astonish you with what He gives you. Ask Him to give you better than what you could have ever hoped or dreamed for, and know that that is exactly what is going to happen. So I really hope that this episode was beneficial. I hope that it resonated. I hope that it changes maybe some beliefs that you had about dua, and I hope it shows just how powerful dua is. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll be dropping episodes every Saturday, inshallah, until I go on maternity leave, which is in like 3 weeks. But yeah, until next time, Assalamu alaikum.